Today, Susan's going to talk about newsjacking. And typically, content marketing is focused on how-tos, technical information, and other ways of establishing ourselves as experts in our field. Susan's going to tell us about another way to create relevant content called newsjacking. Susan is a lifetime technophile who has been covering information technology as a journalist and industry analyst since 1985. She also currently teaches social media and content marketing to unemployed professionals and small business owners. So for today, Susan Breidenbach.
Am I on? Yep. Okay. Oh, I need the clicker. Sorry. Yeah, I'm a little rattled. I got lost coming here today. I've only lived here 13 years. Okay. All right. So basically, content marketing is just too broad to cover the whole, feeding the whole content marketing beast through all kinds of content marketing. It's too broad a subject for this length of the session today. So I'm going to focus on one of the hottest areas of content marketing, which is newsjacking. Which way? Sorry. Okay, there we go. All right. First, though, regardless of what kind of content marketing you're doing, you need to find a niche. I think a lot of us, when we get a little desperate, we try to be sort of a jack of all trades. We're just throwing the spaghetti against the wall. And it really doesn't work in content marketing, any kind of content marketing. You need to go narrow and deep rather than broad and shallow. Okay? There's less competition that way. You're a big fish in a little pond. You'll get a more devoted following that way. And this is a cliche but true. You've got to follow your passion, because when you first start, you're going to basically be talking to yourself. And if you're not engaging yourself, you're not going to engage anybody else either. So you've really got to want to talk about the topic that you pick. So that's important. Don't just think about what the market is important, but within that reality, you really need to find something that you love. Also, just keep in mind, originality is overrated. In social media, R&D stands for rip off and duplicate. Obviously, we've heard a lot about curation yesterday. You curate important content. You can reuse and repurpose your old content. And basically, what you're doing is you're sifting and refining through all the noise out there. And you want your blog to become your website, to become a hub of a certain kind of specialized information. All right? But you got to show yourself. Corporations, there was an article, it was more than a year ago now, talking about how corporations were getting cold on blogging. And the ones that were, they had these corporate blogs with no author. There was no person. And they were these dry, kind of journalistic things, and nobody cared about them. So you want to show yourself. You want to be an individual talking. And also add commentary. It's not just a dry news story. You know, what do you really think about this stuff? And another way to show yourself is, and you have to be clever about this, and you can't do it too often, is you do what's called an off-topic rant. And that's okay every once in a while. Just let off some steam. All right? Just stay away from politics and religion. Unless you're blogging about political things, that's different then. This is a great article that I'm going to post these slides so you can just link to it and read it, but 52 types of content. How-to tutorials, news in your industry. Definitions are a real easy way. If you see a term that's being used that is kind of being misused or people don't seem to get it. Lists, though, one of the speakers yesterday talked about how lists are the most viral form of content you can create on average. And there's, in the notes part of this particular slide, there's a whole bunch of stuff about lists, including a link to 13 ways to build list posts. So anyway, profiles of important people. You can take research reports that have come out and just kind of do a little synopsis and then link to the report. Interviews, Q&As, case studies are always popular, problem solution, book reviews. Book reviews are real easy if you read a lot. Product reviews. Little product that I've done product reviews for RoboForm because I just think that is the most, dollar for dollar, it's the best investment I've ever made in software, a little $20 thing. That's the way that you might come up with a product that is interesting to your audience and would help them, even though it might not be directly related to what you sell. But the really hottest form of content marketing right now is called newsjacking. And you're basically hijacking whatever happens to be breaking in the news and playing off what it's also called culture jacking, because you're sort of playing off the cultural moment that's being created by this event. And you're joining the hottest conversations. This event is generating this huge conversation, and it's giving you basically a captive audience that you can just you join that conversation. The momentum's already going. You didn't have to create the buzz. The buzz is already out there. You're just going to hitch a ride on it. And again, it's what's called real-time content marketing. That's what makes it powerful, but it's also what makes it tricky. It's basically a new term for an old concept. I can remember way back in long, long time ago, some of you are too young to remember this, you might not even have been born yet, but in the beginning, in the computer area, there were mainframes, and mainframes were IBM. And then in the late 60s and early 70s, a couple of upstart companies, which were basically what Microsoft and Apple were in the 80s, came along with what are called mini computers. And IBM didn't have a mini computer. Mini computers let smaller companies buy computers because they could now afford them. They couldn't afford a mainframe. And so finally, IBM, very late, came out with a mini computer, and there was all this talk in the press about how IBM was now legitimizing this renegade mini computer section of the market. So Data General, which was the biggest rogue of the renegades at the time, bought an entire page not the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and basically said, people say that IBM is legitimizing the mini computer market by entering it. The bastards say, welcome. Now that was a blatant ad. It wasn't brand journalism, which is mostly what we're talking about here, but still they were basically taking this major, major news event. I mean, it was front page every newspaper in the country. It wasn't even the business section. And they just hijacked that to their own benefit and kind of made fun of their competitor, new competitor. So again, it's been going on for decades. What's different now is that technology lets us do this in real time. There's all kinds of great tools out there that you can use so you can do it in real time. One of the best ways to find news to hijack is just to watch Twitter when big events suddenly start happening. A lot of times they get reported on Twitter faster than anywhere else. Okay, a consensus definition of newsjacking, it's basically the process of injecting your ideas or angles into breaking news, and then in real time, and the objective is to generate coverage about your own brand. So what you're trying to do with newsjacking, you're trying to do the basic marketing stuff, educate customers, drive traffic to your site, but increase your awareness of your brand. But this is kind of the ultimate goal, is you want to validate your brand as a thought leader in your industry, and then you're becoming a trusted source of information, which in turn gives you the credibility to launch into full-scale what's called brand journalism. Now, speaking of journalism, all this stuff is ruffling journalistic feathers a lot. And I come from a journalism background, by the way, but a lot of the traditional news outlets are very threatened by all of this. And this is a typical comment. Newsjacking and native advertising / brand journalism are turning the news into one big advertisement. But studies actually validate their concerns. Studies show that most of the public out there considers brands a credible source of information. They don't automatically discount information because it came from a brand instead of from a professional news outlet. I frankly think that the news media, the traditional news media, is just, they still are trying to retrofit their old business model to the new reality, and that's never going to work. They need to figure out a new business model, and then they don't have to feel so threatened, because they're in this circle of the wagon kind of mentality, and it's not going to work. I was working for a major 100-year-old successful publishing company, running a magazine group for them in the mid-90s when the web first started peeking its head out and scaring the print publishers. And I can't tell you what that was like. You know, just first the outright denial, and then just desperately trying to figure out how to convince themselves that this was just more of the same thing when it wasn't. Okay, again, yeah. So what you want to do is kind of think of a wave. You need to catch the wave while it's building. This is one of the tricky parts about newsjacking. Most of the people that try to do it, they wait until the wave has already peaked and crested and is kind of piddling out. you want to get it right when that buzz is still building, before it even crests, so that by the time it crests, you're already being found by the search engines because you're using the same keywords as the news story, okay? Just think of this big spotlight on this event, and you want to kind of sneak under the range of that spotlight so it illuminates your brand a little bit too. And also, again, you've got this captive audience that's being created by this event that you don't usually have, and so you want to leverage that captive audience. Timing is really, really, really essential. I tried to find a new study. I haven't found a new one, but at least 2 years ago, a study showed that the half-life of social media content is less than 3 hours and shrinking. And I'm sure it's way less than that now. I just don't know what it is. But that's how ephemeral this stuff is. You've got to do it early and quickly. You've got to be the first person on the scene. It requires a bit of moxie, really, which I think a lot of companies, especially the public companies that have to worry about legal approval and all that kind of thing, it's kind of putting a crimp in their style. But you really have to just be not only agile, but you have to be willing to just put your neck out there. And you got to create content on the fly. That's really hard in these enterprise environments, where, especially if there's like a PR agency involved, and you got all these layers of approval and everything. You don't have time to get together and do brainstorming sessions and have rounds, approval rounds and everything. You need to do it immediately, and again, catch that wave before it's even crested. So, how do you newsjack? First, you have to pay attention to breaking news. So you subscribe to your favorite news channels. If you are a local company serving only local clients or customers, you want to absolutely read every bit of local news that there is. And watch, I don't mean the print, I mean when it first comes out online. But that doesn't mean that you can't newsjack national news or international news for a local business. You can. It's just that it's even more powerful if you can use the local stories. All right. You want to be positive. I'm sure you've all seen these studies about whether it's about blogging or any kind of other social media. Content is more likely to get shared if it's positive than if it's negative. So it's easier to do positive comment if you're newsjacking a positive or neutral news story. It's hard to be positive when you are hijacking something like the Boston Marathon bombings or some huge natural or man-made disaster. It can be done, but it's harder. Don't force the connection between your brand and the event. Okay, what your content, I should say, the content that you are going to create that you're trying to hijack the news for to promote. It needs to be a subtle and natural segue. Okay, it can't be a jarring, like, wait a minute, why are they connecting these two things? That will never work. And you see a lot of companies trying to force connections on big news stories that just don't really exist. Okay, so what do? When this news story starts to break, what are the keywords that people are typing in to find this news story and follow what's going on? You need to take those keywords and put them in your own content. Create really good content that's relevant to your audience, and that, again, there's some kind of natural segue from the news event topic. All right. You also need to be the first one on the scene. And if somebody else is already out there, don't waste your time. Just find another event. And again, syndicate content to other media outlets as much as you can. Use social media to disseminate. Also, as always, encourage discussion. It's more likely to go viral that way. Okay. There are newsjackable stories all over the place. It shouldn't be hard to find them for almost any business. Here are some examples for local businesses and local stories. If you were a construction company, and let's say there's a high-profile fire in a historic building, you could use that to create some content about the importance of code compliance and proper building inspections. Say there's a local bank robbery, and you're a home security company. Well, the bank robbery didn't have anything to do with home security, but you can see how you can segue into talking about what security systems are more reliable than others. The big challenge, this Grant Porter just wrote a recent book on newsjacking, and he's pointing out the tools make it kind of deceptively easy to do these instant mashups and websites. But the trick is to justify that connection between your content that you're creating that's kind of tying in your brand to this event. So the playful ones are good, but again, you really need a positive story to go playful. Otherwise, you've got to be very respectful and somewhat somber in trying to newsjack something like the Boston Marathon. This is extremely serendipitous. I actually saw recently a C-suite title called Chief Serendipity Officer. So I'm not kidding. This stuff is very, very serendipitous. You can't control it, you can't predict it. You just have to be ready to catch that wave and go whenever it appears. It can even be accidental. There's a great story about Poland Spring. I don't know if I didn't watch it, but after the State of the Union, the opposing party gets to do their own presentation, and Rubio had this horrible attack of dry mouth, and apparently he kept dodging off the main camera view, out of the main camera view, and taking slugs from a bottle of Poland spring water. And the label was visible to the audience worldwide. And so people just started making funny little blogs about it, and they mentioned the brand, and it went viral. But Poland Spring did not respond to it fast enough. They completely missed the peak of that buzz. They got this incredible free publicity, and they didn't really capitalize on it to the extent that they could have. It works for B2B. Most of the famous examples are more in the B2C market, but it works fine with B2B. Kinvey newsjacked, Salesforce.com is the giant in the software as a service, sales automation and customer relation management area of software. And this little tiny Kinvey company, when Salesforce announced that they were entering Kinvey's little niche, basically Goliath is entering David's market like the IBM and Data General. And they did a story about this, and they got major coverage in TechCrunch, which in their field is huge. And this is what the marketing VP said about it. You can't just put the great content out there and do your SEO right and everything. You have to actually actively engage. So these social media relationships, you have to have them, you have to leverage them. You can't just write the blog post and put it out there. I was actually involved in this particular newsjacking project. There was a huge CVS blunder. They got major egg on their face, the big drugstore giant. What was Affordable Home Health Care Act, the federal 2010 legislation, requires that employers come up with proactive wellness programs for their employees. So CVS took the stick approach and basically said, if you don't participate in these wellness programs that we're making available, then we're going to penalize you by making you pay an additional $600 a year as your contribution to your health insurance. And it was all over the news, really got bad press on that. And so this little tiny startup called Kias, which provides software as a service-based solutions to employers like CVS, and they use the carrot approach. They use gamification and contests and everything. And so they wrote a story they pitched a story about why the carrot approach works better than CVS's stick approach, and we got it placed in Wired.com. So that was a lot of fun. Examples of good newsjacking, Oreo's tweet, people heard about that. There was the power outage. They just instantly jumped on that and did a topical tweet, and it went viral, and it was just amazing. That's a link to the story, the actual story. There's a company that makes alcoholic beverages called Diageo. They did a really good, I don't know how to pronounce it, they did a really good newsjacking a couple of years ago because there were catastrophic floods in Victoria, Australia. And that was a good example of how you could newsjack a very negative event. The Super Bowl thing wasn't really that negative. The Boston Marathon was newsjacked successfully by two of its sponsors, Adidas and Boston Beer Company. And also, these are, obviously everybody newsjacks the Oscars, but this links to the author thinks are the 10 best newsjacking examples from the Oscars. My favorite's Oscar Mayer. But it can backfire very easily. I'm running out of time here. Epicurious did a really, really bad way. They tried to newsjack the Boston Marathon. It was really, really awful. The designer, Kenneth Cole, tried to use the Cairo protests he tried to link them to excitement about his new spring line of fashion. And there are many, many poor taste attempts to newsjack Hurricane Sandy. The one of them in Style magazine, they made two mistakes. You know that Christmas song, "Oh, the weather outside is frightful, but the fire is so delightful." They tried to use that, totally inappropriate for a hurricane. And then they basically said, while you're stuck in your home because of this hurricane, here are five cosmetics tips you can try out. And yeah, very poor taste. So in summary, it's real-time content marketing. That's really what it is. And like all content marketing, you got to put the content first and the marketing second. And the marketing needs to be even more subtle than it is in regular content marketing, I think. You're basically serving your target audience's desire for particular kinds of news and facts and opinion. The hope is that you can slip in a mention of your brand and even a link, if you can get away with it. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. And then obviously you use social media for dissemination and viral spread. And it's this is the most important thing, though. Is it's just so fleeting. It's got to be real time, because if you're going to go out and make the effort and spend some money, like this company that I did the project for, they took too long, really. They could have they paid me, they took all this time, they used their time, but they had to, they didn't catch, the buzz was past. The peak of the buzz was past by the time they actually got this thing in Wired.com. So it's got to be really, really timely. You need to be the first on the scene in terms of your competitors. You don't want to do any kind of Me Too newsjacking. So here are a couple of books. Like I mentioned Grant Hunter's book. Also, David Meerman Scott's actually the person who coined the term newsjacking a few years ago. And he's got a book out. And before I post these slides, I'll actually do hot links to the book titles for you. So, any questions?
And we have microphones on each side of the room. Susan, in my industry, we target diabetics, people with metabolic syndrome.
Yeah.
We have some knowledge that possibly the American Diabetes Association is going to make a major announcement, so we're going to start to write our story early. Is that a good example of newsjacking?
Yes, you can definitely use prior knowledge of events. In the Data General case, that wasn't real time then, but that was not a very well kept secret that IBM was about to release its first mini computer. So absolutely, in your industry, watch for your industry. But the point is, don't just stick to your industry. You don't have to stick to that. You can go much broader than that. This is not curating. When you're looking for news, you're not curating the news. You're looking for anything that you can tie some content into, and it might not be specific to your industry. Okay, these natural disasters a lot of times don't have anything to do, for example, with any particular industry. So, any other questions? Yeah? How do you monetize this? This is mostly marketing, and so it's not really, it's more like content marketing, and marketing isn't directly monetized typically. I mean, you can obviously do ads on your content and all that kind of thing, but you're kind of edging into what's called brand journalism, and you kind of have the same problem that traditional journalism has with the monetization. Yeah. Yeah.
I had a comment on a question. With the Mark Rubio thing, I noticed that DC Water on their Twitter immediately jumped on it and said, "We have great tap water. Why are you drinking bottled water?"
Right.
Which I thought was
example.
great.
Perfect. Yeah.
But I was curious, I didn't know if Poland Springs, did they actually have a response, and was it just too late?
Oh, it was way too late.
Okay,
it was
so they
almost
did
pointless.
respond.
It was
Okay.
pretty much pointless because
Okay.
the story was over by then.
Okay,
Yeah.
curious. Thank you.
But they did get, it was just a huge opportunity that it happened by accident that they benefited from it. But if they truly newsjacked it, they could have ridden it a lot farther. Yeah.
Susan, we'll take one last question.
Okay.
I'm from a small area in Nevada, and I'm trying to bring awareness to the produce that's being grown there. So could you give me some examples of news jacking for that?
Well, obviously, there are periodically bad things that happen. You've got every once in a while some produce will get on the market that is bad in various ways. I'm trying to remember the last time there was a big one involving, stuff like that happens.
Just bring in awareness that ours
Yeah.
is good.
And the other thing is there occasionally will be news about environmental issues like how the groundwater is being ruined by commercial fertilizers and things like that, you know.
We ranked number 3 in the state, so, okay, that's
Yeah,
some good
yeah.
ideas.
Mhm. And also the whole health thing too, the affordable health care and these wellness programs, you could really play off of those with these healthy local, eat healthy local produce.
I see a lot of
Yeah.
breaking news on that
You,
topic.
you could
But-
have
but
you can have a lot of fun with yours.
But one of the, in
Everybody
support-
has to eat, so, yeah.
Yeah, in support of what you just said, it took me back to when Twitter was just beginning, and I was online, and they had the peanut scare, where there was mold in the peanuts or something like that. And Whole Foods was talking about where their peanut butter comes from,
Yeah.
and why it was safe and all of that.
Whole Foods has a lot of newsjacking, yeah.
I mean, and because of that, I had seen their Twitter feed, and it was like, find out more information on this, and I ended up signing up for Twitter, not even knowing what it was, because they newsjacked the peanut thing.
But that
So it
is-
got me to do something I wouldn't have normally done,
Yeah.
using newsjacking.
Twitter is just an incredible resource in terms of finding news when it's breaking, so you can catch that wave early.
Thank you.
Okay?
Thank you, Susan. Susan Breidenbach.